So the internet. The internet. Do you even know how dangerous the internet is? It is so very dangerous that even people on the internet admit how dangerous the internet is. Don't ever trust anything you see on the internet, they say. And they're entirely correct about that. Because on the internet, there is misinformation. Devil curse the man who created this misinformation distribution system. Fake news, Facebook groups, people who pretend to be experts on things on YouTube, or worse, personal blogs. The internet has created this new problem, and it is impossible to contain. People are reading incorrect things and believing them. This has never happened before. Okay, I gotta turn this down a notch, otherwise you people will shit your pants from this Oscar-worthy horror film performance. This is not a Halloween video. But seriously, what the fuck? It seems like no matter where I look these days, it's people going crazy about how the internet is so full of misinformation, and misinformation is such a brand new massive problem on the internet. You have all the just straight up fake news, you have the bullshit science being peddled in anti-vaxx Facebook groups, you have the filter bubbles that happen with polarized politics. And yes, those are indeed areas where misinformation propagates like a superbug, because who would have thought that people talking to each other would be a very good vector for the spread of the disease of misinformation. But are we actually going to pretend like it's the internet that somehow created this problem? Because I don't know if you've been around, history, but misinformation has always been a problem, you dumb motherfucker. In the 1980s, Jack Chick and his evangelical Christian church buddies declared that Dungeons and Dragons was satanic witchcraft and demon worship. They didn't use the internet to convince people of that. This was on the television, in the newspapers, in Christian books, and in church services. Parents all over America had their panties in a bunch about Dungeons and Dragons. There were calls for the game to be outlawed. But okay, that one was admittedly built on the back of a misinformation campaign perpetrated by powerful institutions for centuries and millennia before, so let's maybe pick something non-religious. You remember when you were a teenager and you went to rainbow parties and got blowjobs from other random teenagers? Yeah, me neither, because they didn't fucking happen. Basically, what happened was that Oprah had a book that she read because she found it, or they gave it to her, someone, and then she suddenly went on television claiming that teenage girls were putting on different colors lipstick and giving teenage boys blowjobs so there would be a rainbow there. Parents all over the US once again got their panties in a bunch about pretty much any and all social gathering that their children, teenage children obviously, were going to unattended. This was in the early 2000s, so while the internet was around, mums weren't on it. Let's go a little back in history to the 1920s. Oh boy, do we have a bunch of problems that only came around after the turn of the century. 20 years in, and people already being corrupted by the dreaded Negro music. Damn you, jazz! Why must you assault the good and moral foundations of our society with your smooth, sensual saxophone sounds, as was the prevalent belief during the early stages of your existence for some reason? I mean, the reason was juvenoia paired with racism. That was the reason. In parts of Asia, there's been you might say, a mental disorder called Koro, and it's existed there for centuries, if not thousands of years. What is Koro? Well, it's when your penis shrinks and it eventually grows inward and then you die. This has never happened, ever. It's literally not medically possible for that to happen. Doesn't change the fact that people believe this with such intensity that they will feel their penis shrinking despite objective measurements to the contrary. People have believed that the evil eye can make bad things happen to you for so long that there's records reaching back to antiquity. Misinformation has been a constant companion to the human species and a constant villain in the human story. And yes, I do count most myths and folklore as misinformation also, because there's always been people who have been trying to debunk that shit. Human beings have a very strong tendency to try and know things about the world around them, because not knowing things about the world around them is scary, and it's even scarier than knowing things about the world around them which are themselves scary. And if someone comes along and offers an explanation to people that fits their worldview in some way, people will believe it very often, and even if it's untrue, and if it's demonstrably untrue, then they will still believe it. If this piece of misinformation comes with the label of don't trust other people who tell you that this isn't true and try to offer you even alternate explanations because they mean you harm attached, as most strongly propagated memes tend to, it's going to be pretty difficult to dislodge these things from people's heads. And this has always been the case. It's not like people who used to be uneducated about a thing just had a gap of knowledge in that specific area. And then when someone came along who actually knew what was going on, maybe he filled that part of their head with knowledge, but otherwise it would have remained empty. They had their own strong opinions on how things worked. And sometimes, if you came along with the correct information, you were burned at the stake. Stupid urban legends were around long before the internet. Stupid conspiracy theories were also around long before the internet. Now, has the internet sort of changed the game of the spread of information and misinformation? Yes, definitely, but I would argue that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's always been the case that a lie has traveled halfway around the world while the truth was still putting its shoes on. And as much as the internet has accelerated the spread of bullshit, it's also accelerated the spread of truth. I would go so far as to say that in relation to each other, their speeds have not changed at all. And I would further go as far as to say that fear about the spread of misinformation and the dangers that this entails is in itself a budding moral panic fueled by misinformation. The internet didn't create the anti-vaxx movement. Facebook didn't create the anti-vaxx movement. That's just where the conversation happens. The anti-vaxx movement would have happened anyway. And as much as without the internet anti-vaxxers wouldn't have the tools to propagate their bullshit as well, people who fight against the anti-vaxx movement by debunking their bullshit and trying to pull people out of that also wouldn't have the tools of the internet at their disposal. We as a species are always going to have certain subsets of the population that believe weird shit that just isn't true. And we as individuals will always have strongly held beliefs that just aren't true because at some point somebody told us something that wasn't true, probably believing that it was true themselves. And we'll go through life having this belief, and we'll never notice that it's wrong because you can't check all of your beliefs all the time. There's way many of them, of the beliefs that you have. But that is the price of free expression. Be wary of anyone who proclaims to want to protect you from the evils of misinformation. Whatever tools they're building, whatever laws they are drafting, 100% I guarantee you they will be used for censorship somewhere down the road. Because wouldn't a moral panic about the dangers of misinformation be a great time to implement this censorship infrastructure, this information control network that powerful people have been historically trying to implement and trying to impose, especially on the internet, for decades? So be wary of misinformation, do your due diligence, fact check shit. But also be careful with the people who promise that they'll do it for you, because they probably don't have your best interests at heart. Thank you very much for watching this video. Like, comment, subscribe, share this to your relevant communities, but do not spam them. Damn, I have this down now. I can just... I'm Philly D in this bitch. Consider supporting me on Patreon or Subscribestar, but no rush. Also, maybe get some of the beautiful merchandise that I have. And in that spirit, I mean, I can only repeat the last sentence, really. If you see something that you think might be bullshit, if you see something that you think might be true also, maybe try and fact check it. And see you around, cunts.